Billions of people around the world rely on seafood for sustenance, but obviously overfishing has been a major threat to our ocean. So how is Avant trying to help address that problem?
We start with some cells that is plucked from a fish, and then we develop that outside of the animal bodies. With some starter cells, we can actually produce millions of portions of fish meat and fish fillet. As we know, Asia consumes over 60 and 70% of the seafood that is produced globally.
Dear Fair Planet listeners, this In Focus special has been produced in collaboration with our friends over at Sustainable Asia. Their podcast series, Cool Agriculture, explores food and agricultural solutions for climate change. With Asia consuming over 60% of the world's seafood, we are wondering, could lab-grown fish be the sustainable answer we've been searching for? Let's dive in. Enjoy this episode.
Hey, Sustainable Asia listeners, Charmaine Lee and I are back for a special episode that we're co-producing with Fair Planet. You know, the reason that lab-grown fish could be a game changer here in Asia is because the waters around these regions are becoming more and more overfished.
And it turns out marine life in the ocean creates one of the largest carbon sinks on the planet. So losing fish species could disrupt the marine life food chain, putting this amazing ocean carbon sink at risk. But before we talk about lab-grown fish as a climate change solution, we first have to understand the history of this overfishing problem in Asia and the importance of fish delicacies in the food culture here. So Marcia took a walk through the seafood market area in Shenwan, Hong Kong with Stanley Shea, Marine Program Director at the NGO Bloom. Stain has dedicated his life to protecting fish species that are being eaten to extinction.
You'll hear a lot of background noise, lots of cars, lots of people moving around. Hong Kong's a really dense, wonderful, fabulous Cantonese city. But it used to be predominantly seafood shops, right?
Yeah, you're right in the center of like the trade hub of the dry seafood areas, like in mainly Hong Kong. But we are actually like handling more than around half of like the shark fins coming into Hong Kong, sea cucumber, and also fish maw. If we look at the trade data compared to regional, welcome to trade hub.
So historically, though, how did that happen? Why is it that these shops set up right here in Hong Kong?
So basically, it's the tradition. It's like because the area is next to the waterfront, and then think about in the past, like all these container boats coming in, unloading, loading is easier. It's the geographical advantage of easy for unloading all the dry seafood, and also that's why they set up the retail shop here and all concentrated here. And it has been years and years, and now it's still coming from container, but they don't use this port, they use other port. And also that's why there are so many trucks, because like all this dry seafood coming in, unloading and loading, you can see trucks everywhere in this area.
So Hong Kong used to be a fishing village decades ago, and in this street that we're standing in, it's still reminiscent of that. We're standing in the hub of the seafood trade right here. And just 5 blocks away are the high-rise fancy hotels and offices with restaurants that are consuming many of these fish delicacies.
Hong Kong is one of the biggest of dry seafood product as an import. So for export, like normally we call re-export. So, but it's difficult to say the re-export data because we need to compare to other places, which is not many places have those data available. But at least for the import side, we have looked at fish maw, sea cucumber, and also shark fin. Hong Kong is definitely one of the highest import in the world.
Hong Kongers and Southern Chinese love seafood. In fact, there are 4 types of seafood that are a status symbol and a luxury delight.
So we call bao sim qi tou, bao, which is the abalone, and then qi, which is the shark fin, and then some, which is the sea cucumber, and then the last one, which is like tou, is the fish maw. So just give you an idea, it's like basically it's the history tradition from like 100 years ago, saying like those are 4 treasuries, like for treasures from the sea, and that's why they were prominent being trade and normally eat in luxury banquet. So if we look at the trade data, we actually import those dry seafood from more than 125 countries or places into Hong Kong in the past 15 years.
Hong Kong's position as an international seafood trade hub, though, has put it in hot water because many of those seafood delicacies are leading to marine species extinction. Although Hong Kong is a signatory to the International Convention to protect these marine species called CITES, they tend to turn a blind eye to endangered species not on the list.
And it becomes challenging when delicacies like fish maw, which is the dried swim bladders that come from a large fish like a croaker or sturgeon, have become part of the cultural traditions in Hong Kong.
So Charmaine decided to talk to one of her friends, Tracy Fu, whose family owns a dried seafood shop in Shangwan.
因为我们都是
Tracy's family, like many in Hong Kong, migrated from mainland China over a decade ago. Cantonese and Mandarin are both her native languages. After moving, her parents turned their love for seafood into selling dried ones on this street. When I talked to Tracy, she told me that their customers are willing to pay high prices for fish maw, even if it's not a special occasion.
它受欢迎的原因都是两个，一个就是
Fish maw is popular for two reasons. One is for collecting. If one buys it now, its value will increase after 10 or 20 years. Like Bahama Taiwanese fish maw is very rare in the market, so its price can go up to thousands and millions of dollars.
Tracy told me that the second reason was the perceived nutritional value of fish maw. It's believed to boost blood flow. For example, she said that pregnant women and women after giving birth use fish maw to help them recover or feel better.
Can you explain that a bit further? So, is fish maw seen also as medicine?
Although fish maw isn't exactly a drug in traditional Chinese medicine, in a broader sense, different food is believed to help improve our health in different circumstances. For example, if you feel dizzy and want to vomit, soup with raw ginger is supposed to make you feel better in traditional Chinese medicine. It has a so-called heating effect.
Okay, so like when I drink herbal tea with fried foods at dinner, it has a bitter taste, but it makes my stomach and throat feel better, so I drink it, right?
That's right. Although a large part of traditional Chinese medicine is still not proved to be effective in scientific research, it's become a cultural custom in the region.
But has traditional Chinese medicine always used seafood like fish maw? Or is it mostly herbs and plants and flora and stuff?
As it turns out, the traditional Chinese medicine from the Tang Dynasty, the period when this medicine first developed, didn't use any animals at all. I spoke with Dr. Li Xinglao, professor at the Virginia University of Integrative Medicine and the former director of the School of Chinese Medicine at the University of Hong Kong. For years, Dr. Liu campaigned to replace the animal ingredients with herbal ones in traditional Chinese medicine, because many of these animal ingredients, such as pangolin scales, rhino horns, and of course fish maw, often pushes these animal species to extinction.
One of the most famous traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, Sun Ximao, wrote a lot of books in the Tang Dynasty in about the year 682. And right now, a lot of doctors hang up his quotes on the wall. He said that you can't discriminate in treating patients, regardless their age, gender, career, class, and beauty. He also suggested that animals and humans are both spiritual beings. So if you kill one to save the other, this violates the principle of traditional Chinese medicine.
And what's surprising is that fish maw is also a rare gem for women's skincare and beauty. It's 72 times more expensive than other parts of the fish, so it's really in demand here in Asia. But a lot of seafood is in demand and being overfished, so why the focus on fish maw?
Well, it turns out that certain species of fish have larger fish bladders, and these fish bladders make fish maw. Those species of fish are basically going extinct now around Chinese waters. So the seafood traders have moved onto the totoaba fish in the Gulf of Mexico.
So for that total harbor species is not in our region. First of all, fish maw is a gas bladder. So the gas bladder actually controlling the buoyancy of a fish. So the fish actually they would communicate. So they communicate by like shaking their gas bladder. So and then they will produce certain noise. So that's why that fish when they have to do mating, they will actually call like produce some sounds by vibrating their gas bladder. So naturally, those gas bladder are thicker than other fish. So that's why people after the fish maw is after that specific species or type. The total harbor is so expensive because they have thicker like gas bladder and they can make better fish maw. In Hong Kong, we used it to have also a similar species called the Chinese bahaba, which can be found in Hong Kong and in China. But the species basically now is called functional extinct. So they only occasionally found one or two every 2 years or one.
So these fish species, the Mexican totoaba and the Chinese bahaba, which have these large bladders, are now being fished to extinction. But it's not just these fish species that are impacted. During the fishing process, there's something called bycatch, whereby other animals get caught in the fishing net. And the endangered finless porpoise, the vaquita, is one of those bycatch in the Gulf of Mexico.
It's because the vaquita, they were endemic to A's in Mexico. And then because the fishery tried to catch like the total harbor was for the fish maw, and then they have something the bycatch. It's like they kill like the mammal vaquita. So and then they are almost extinct. So you can see in this type of things is your demand is after one product, but you are killing not only the product itself, the fish, but also accidentally for the mammal.
Stan told me that the marine conservationists have successfully lobbied to put the totoaba and vaquita species on the International CITES Agreement, which, as we described earlier, bans them from being traded.
But according to Tracy Fu, this did not stop the demand for fish maw at their seafood shop.
The fish maw from endangered species can cost up to tens of thousands for a small piece. If you can't purchase it in the legal market, it gets very expensive in the black market. And you have to find the right people to sell them to you. So not in any random dried seafood shops. Rich people feel very proud just to be able to showcase this rare fish maw at home.
That high price has also attracted fishermen around the world to keep hunting and trading totoaba, so much so that fish maw is called cocaine of the sea. Fishermen in African countries, for example, are able to earn 10 times more for such fish than other species.
Losing even 2 marine species can disrupt the food chain in the ocean, putting those powers of the ocean carbon sink at risk.
Yeah, so I talked to Kenneth Lee, the former professor of developmental and regenerative biology thematic research program at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, who described how this ocean carbon sink works.
For example, in the fish, they eat a lot of algae and other things. And if the fish poop or fish feces that are produced help to get rid of 1.65 billion tons of carbon from the atmosphere. All the different types of fish, you have predators, you have all the algae grazers, you have all types of fish in the ecosystem. So that's obviously will impact on the environment and the carbon sink. So obviously we like to see a thriving marine environment, but obviously now it's overfishing, you get industrial scale fishing. Even the fishing boats itself is generating lots of carbon dioxide with the use in petrol and diesels. And because they're dragging that heavy fishing net, that's going to take a lot of energy itself.
Kenneth moved to Scotland some years ago to start a company called Alkane Biosciences, and he now consults with Afan Meats, the Hong Kong company developing lab-grown fish maw, or as he calls it in Cantonese, fa gao.
And fa gao is actually made Primarily, about 99% of it is made from collagen, while the rest is actually fish cells. So it's quite easy to synthetically produce collagen, and then you put in some fish cells, and then you have foie gras. It's very profitable to do that. That way, you don't need to overfish the foie gras.
And it's a win-win solution because fish maw is so expensive. Often meats gets more revenue in their early years to cover development costs, and hopefully consumers still get their high collagen from fish maw with the same texture and taste.
I was curious why Carrie Chan, the director of Avant Meats, started on her journey to make lab grown fish maw. So I called her up and asked her.
If you remember, for the past actually 5-6 years, the climate change, the extreme climate actually become more and more severe. And I thought it is just not fast enough. And if we wait everyone to become plant-based primarily, then I think we won't wait for till that time, basically the planet. So when I came across 2018, I read something and someone is developing technology to produce meat without animal in the equation. I thought that's great.
By 2019, Avant Meats established their first lab in Hong Kong to cultivate fish maw prototypes. But their journey hasn't been easy. While Singapore became the first country in the world to commercialize lab-grown meat in 2020, Hong Kong still doesn't allow Avant Meats to trial their fish maw in restaurants. And there are other challenges too.
The other hurdle is actually the cost reduction. And because a lot of the technology is born from medical field and research field, so a lot of material ingredients are so expensive. But in our case, at least, for example, we already reduced the cost by more than 90%. The major cost driver is the nutrient that we feed to the cell. So finding alternative to that is highly viable, although it will take time for the R&D to actually find out the best combination of different component in the nutrient broth. So I think we see the quick reduction in the production curve.
What's confusing is that earlier Kenneth said that it's easy to synthetically produce collagen and then inject it into the fish maw cells. So I asked him to explain how these fish maw cells are multiplied and why it is so expensive.
You have to think of ways to grow it up. So it's just like a little baby. So you can assume you have a whole network of cells, like you're starting with 1,000,000 cells. That's still invisible. And you coax it to grow. Now, in order to grow these cells, they'll have all the nutrients, like growth factors, salts, amino acids, and all the proteins necessary for growth in order to get a little baby. Now, this feed is very expensive, especially growth factors. That could cost thousands and thousands. In fact, if you want really high volume, it could cost £1,000,000 just for the growth factors, just to grow them up.
Growing these cells up is one of the biggest challenges the cultured meat industry faces at the moment.
So one of the bottleneck is, can you produce sufficient growth factors for these cells to grow? You can grow as many babies you like in a house, in a flat, but you have a limited floor space. Okay, so in order to get more babies stack into that building, you have to stack them up. We call that 3 dimension. So you have to have cells develop that like to grow in 3 dimension vertically. So it's just like buying flats in London. You're living in a horizontal space, but we build high rises. Then there's much cheaper and you need less material.
And Kenneth told me that once you have built this vertical space, you have to fill it with numerous bioreactors to create the reaction that multiplies the cells. And this process costs a lot.
Inside the bioreactor, you have to keep things mixing up so that all the cells get exposed to the nutrients and the requirement. And you also need to change that. So all the nutrients become waste products, so you have to exchange for fresh medium. So that's another technical problem.
And it turns out, producing lab-grown fish, our climate change solution, actually uses a lot of energy.
But with fish, the requirement is less, and the temperature to culture the cells is slightly lower. Because for animal cells, it's like 37 degrees, and you're actually burning energy to create that. So that's not carbon neutral, that's not sustainable. So we have to balance that act. Are you actually sustainable? And how do you compare with conventional farming? Are you using more energy than of conventional farming? Are you creating more waste product than conventional farming? So we have to compare these data that when it comes through.
So, lab-grown fish definitely helps solve overfishing and marine species extinction, which, as we discussed earlier, will fight climate change. But the energy utilization to make the final product for mass consumption could be an issue.
Okay, so 2 points for and 1 point against. I wonder also, will lab grown fish maw be as healthy as the fish maw from the ocean?
But the problem is heavy metal, something like that, in fish that can accumulate. So if that goes back to feeding the fish that eat that, that do not go away. So cumulatively, we will have more and more exposure to heavy metal from seafood. So coming to another point, which means that our ocean has been a easy and free dumping ground since Industrial Revolution. I think back in the days, people just think that, okay, I secretly pump some of my waste into the ocean, right? And no one will catch me. And now the regulation become more stringent, but the ocean, certain part is definitely very polluted.
A study from Jilin University and the Chinese Academy of Sciences showed that metal pollution in Liaodong Bay has contaminated at least 5 fish species, and that people are susceptible to high health risks. It's not limited to China, but a worldwide issue.
Scientists say that if we're exposed to such heavy metal for a long time, we could develop allergies, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and even cancer.
And we know the heavy metal, radioactive waste, as well as microplastic, is a very major concern for consumers. And there are studies to show that actually, if we do have seafood from the ocean or etc. On a regular basis, we can expose to 55,000 pieces of microplastic per person per year. So I think besides planet's need, I think for consumer and human consumption with concern about health, having another solution that we know how things are produced and we do not have microplastic, we don't have heavy metal in the process, I think it offers an interesting option for consumers down the line.
So it could be that lab grown fish maw is healthier than that from the ocean, which makes 3 points for lab grown fish. 1, possibly healthier. 2, reduces overfishing and marine species extinction. And 3, protects the ocean carbon sink. Those are 3 pretty strong arguments. The downsides, of course, are the considerable energy requirements and currently the high production costs, all of which we'll understand better as the technology develops.
And I guess the big question is though, Marcy, will Asian consumers, especially those who eat fish more for its perceived nutritional value, be convinced? I asked Tracy Fu about it, and she said her family's clients are more traditional and want to stick with how things are. And in our earlier season on pangolins, Dr. Liu said that in the original Chinese medicine from the Tang Dynasty over 1,000 years ago, Chinese doctors did not prescribe animal ingredients to patients. So maybe we can get back to those days?
那再回过来，香港吃的这个鱼图啊，这个 The fish Hong Kongers eat are not traditional Chinese medicine, and even if it has nutritional value, you can extract the useful part and turn it into a pill, right? If it's just a status symbol, and people do want to taste the texture, then artificial fish maw can work. It's a little similar to plant-based meat in vegetarian restaurants.
Sounds like it may take some convincing for the people in Hong Kong that eat the fish maw for status and want to stick with tradition. Luckily, though, there's a new generation of Hong Kongers out there, like marine conservationist Stan Shea, that are a little bit more open minded.
So I do eat seafood, and for the lab-grown thing, I'm more than open because I'm from Hong Kong. We basically eat anything that so not a problem.
I think I'll follow Stan Shea's approach. What do you think, Charmaine?
Definitely. Also a Hong Konger here.
That's right. I'm Marcy Trent Long, and I'm the executive producer of Sustainable Asia. Charmaine Lee and I are the hosts and producers of this episode. Zach Chiang and Sam Lee Xiaoyu are the associate producers. A big thank you to our guests, Stanley Shea from the NGO Bloom, Dr. Li-Xing Lao from the Virginia University of Integrative Medicine, Kenneth Lee of OCAM Biosciences, Carrie Chan of Avant Meats, and Tracy Fu, whose family owns a dried seafood shop here in Hong Kong. This episode is co-produced with Fair Planet, an independent media focused on solutions journalism for human rights and climate issues. Fair Planet Media aims to combine local journalism with global reporting to inform and engage communities across the globe. Check out the show notes for links to their fascinating work. Alexander Mobison created the intro-outro music made with repurposed and recovered waste items. Thanks for listening.